So this is my office. I've done a lot of work on the North Sea, over there. I've worked on the Antarctic, and there you see me with the king and queen, although they were prince and princess at that time. So, and there you see me with the former queen, getting a Medal of Honor.
And what
for
is
arts and science.
And what is your specialty?
I'm a marine ecologist.
Okay.
So marine ecologist, so studying the system as a whole, and my main thing is humans and the sea. So what do they do? How do they change it? The windmills, the fisheries, those sort of things, and how the system works. And I'm still the chairman of the science committee for the North Sea. So even after my retirement, I just continue.
Okay.
and one of the other things is nitrogen, which is a hobby of mine. I did my PhD on the nitrogen cycle in a penguin rookery. That's over there. So that's a huge penguin rookery where we have 500,000 penguins, and that's where I studied nitrogen long time ago.
And what percentage of the air is nitrogen?
Of our air here?
Yeah.
78.
78%.
Yeah, but that's N2, completely harmless.
What is the difference?
And N2 is just gaseous nitrogen,
Uh-huh.
and that's 78% of the air that we're breathing, and that's fine. There's no problem with that whatsoever. I mean, that's even saving us. It should be there. But then in different processes, it can be turned into, for example, ammonia. Then hydrogen attaches to nitrogen. Or in what we call the NOx's, then oxygen attaches to nitrogen. And if you have too much of that, it becomes a problem.
And sorry, what form is that?
And NOx, nitrate. You have ammonia and nitrate. And nitrate is with oxygen, and ammonia is with hydrogen. And they form a problem for nature if there is too much. And that's the problem we have in the Netherlands and in quite a lot of other countries.
Okay. Great. So shall we...
Shall we go downstairs?
Yeah.
Fine with me. Watch it smoke.
Okay.
Yes. It's cooler. We published or made 2 reports.
Uh-huh.
There's an old one, which is stating how do we get out of the stickstoff problem in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And we just are publishing one that will be public tomorrow, which is critical notes on the Dutch approach of the nitrogen crisis and possible solutions. And that's a new one, which is still secret at the moment.
Okay.
But it contains, quite a bombshell, I think.
Okay.
My name is Han Lindeboom. I'm a retired professor of Wageningen University. I was professor in Marine Ecology, studying, the last decades, the North Sea. I retired 4 years ago. I was also a professor in Wageningen, Professor of Marine Ecology. And I now have 3 hobbies. The one is the North Sea, the other one is saving the coral reefs in the Caribbean, and the third one is nitrogen. So the last 2.5 years I've been working on the nitrogen problem in the Netherlands, just as a hobby.
Okay, and so nitrogen is at the center of this whole Dutch farmer problem, huh?
Yeah. That's true. It's the main problem here at the moment, and that's why we have this enormous crisis with the farmers protesting and doing all kind of things. And they're trying to negotiate, but it's going to be a very hard and very difficult thing to do and to reach a solution.
So what is the position of the government, would you say? How would you articulate it?
I think at the moment the government has taken the stand that we do have a huge problem with nature, and that due to EU regulations we should save nature and we should do all kind of things. And they have declared that nitrogen is the major problem. Well, I'm an expert in nitrogen, and I dare to say it is not. They have made it a major problem, and now they want to solve that problem by simply eliminating a large amount of farms where you have a lot of ammonia formation, which I think we can do in a completely different way. We have a problem. There are areas in the Netherlands where there is too much nitrogen. But to be honest with you, recently I was in Germany, and certainly within 100 meters within 100 kilometers from the border, the Germans have bigger problems than we, and you don't hear about it because they have not declared it a problem. In the Netherlands, we have declared it a problem, and so we have a problem.
So these regulations are coming from the European Union?
They are coming from the European Union, which is correct. I mean, there is too much nitrogen. What's happening is that, we have nature, and nitrogen is a completely natural compound in nature. Without nitrogen, we would not be there. Very simple. We need it. But nature makes it in a very slow way, and then the humans discovered how they can do that process. So what they're doing, they take nitrogen out of the air and turn it in artificial manure and throw it everywhere. So they are increasing the amount of nitrogen in the surrounding, mainly on their own fields where they want to grow crops, but part of that nitrogen gets into nature, and there are certain plants that don't like it and they disappear. Other plants like it and they appear. So basically what you're doing is changing nature, and there are rules that certainly in the so-called Natura 2000 areas, so the specially designed nature areas, there the government has the obligation to make sure that the amount of nitrogen in that area gets below a certain level. And because we have so many cow and pig farms and chickens actually, especially in a few nature areas in the Netherlands, there they really have a problem that there is too much nitrogen in nature, and that has to be lowered.
And how do they determine what is a Nature 2000 area?
They have, this all started somewhere in the 1980s, and the EU said we need to assign certain nature areas that we are going to save for the future. So there will be special rules how to protect those, and every country has to assign a certain part of their area as Nature 2000 areas. And that is what Netherlands did. The big mistake we made is that majority of the countries have designed a couple of big areas. In the Netherlands we have a few big ones, but we have many small ones. And that is one of the reasons why we have all these problems, because if you have many small ones, there are also many neighboring farms, and they all have to stick to the rules, and that's why they have such a huge problem at the moment.
And was it arbitrary, or was there some method, the way which areas they chose?
There is science behind it. Of course, what they did, because we had new nature areas, and like the Veluwe, for example, which is a beautiful area with forests, with heather, with wildlands, with deer running around. So that was quite logical to make that a nature area, simply because it was a beautiful area. And some other areas, like here on Texel, for example, we have these beautiful sand dunes with special vegetation, and it made sense to make that a nature area, and that's what they did. And but now they have to stick to those new rules, and that's a problem, because that's the rule now. If you are above the so-called critical deposition value, which is a value in which where they say at this moment, if you get above that value, you're damaging nature. So you have to be below that figure.
For nitrogen, you mean?
For nitrogen. Yeah, this is all nitrogen. This is all nitrogen. Not the other things are also problems, but this is all nitrogen. And so you have to be below a certain figure. And if you're not, then you are not allowed to increase the amount of nitrogen produced in that area. So if a farmer wants a few more cows, then and he is in such an area, he cannot do that. And it has become worse, because they more lately introduced that also by if you have building, if you have the building activity, you're also producing nitrogen. A different form, that is nitrate, but it's also producing nitrogen.
Building a building?
Building a building, just building, or a road, whatever, building activities. So building activities produce nitrogen. Not much, but
how does
they
that
do.
work?
Because you have burning processes in that, and so if you have a generator that's running on diesel, then that generator produces nitrate, of NOx as we call it, NOx goes into the air, and that's a problem. And the point now is if you're in an area where you have to lower the amount of deposition, you are not allowed to carry out these activities that produce nitrogen.
But that's like burning any car.
Any car. Now that's all the burning processes, boats, cars, construction works, all this everywhere where you have engines running on fossil fuel, you have a problem. So one of the things to solve this is to go away from fossil fuel and go electric. So one of the solutions will be, in the coming 5 to 10 years, that you run out combustion engines that use fossil fuel and produce these nitrogen compounds. And that can be done, and we will do that, but it will take a while.
I'm just trying to understand, what is the actual environmental problem with nitrogen?
It is acidifying the bottom, so the land. And if the pH gets too low, then plants get problems with growing, etc. So if you have acidified soil, then that's less good for certain plants, and that lowers the nature value of certain areas. So that's certainly what is happening.
So it makes the soil too basic.
It makes the soil too acid.
Too acidic.
Too acid. Ammonia makes it too basic, because that is the basic compound. But that very rapidly turns into the acid compounds. So bacteria turn that into nitrate, and then it's acid. And then it's and one way or another, the Dutch government has decided that this is a huge problem. I'm a microbiologist. I did my PhD on the nitrogen cycle in a penguin colony, where a huge amount of ammonia go into the air. They rain down very close to the rookery in this case. Then we see very close to the rookery that the plant types are changing. Huge grass growth and growing very rapidly and fast. But it's only a distance of a couple of 100 meters. It's only downwind from the rookery, so on the other side you don't see anything. And it has been there for 6,000 years. I mean, I took samples there. There's a peat layer there that was caused by this grass growth. I could date that. And 6,000 years ago, the penguins arrived there, and they did their job. And this all made this peat growing. And here in the Netherlands, they are claiming that if you have this pollution, that slowly but surely it will kill all the vegetation and everything. Well, in that area where I did my studies, they have been there longer than we have had pyramids on this earth, and it's still the same. So it is not true. It is not killing, it is changing. And if you don't like the type of vegetation that will grow there with this pollution, you have a problem. But since it's only a very small area, why not accept it? Because we have the rules. We have stated this area should be special. We want to have the plants here. That's part of the rules. Those type of plants have to be there, and otherwise you will have to take measures. And since those plants don't grow everywhere there anymore, they have a problem. This is a human-created problem, and now they have decided that to bring it down, the amount of nitrogen brought into the environment by the farmers has to be halved within a couple of years, which simply means that you will have, with the way they are doing it at the moment and saying they want to do it, is halving the amount of cows and sheep in this country. And for this island, for example, Texel is a beautiful sheep island. There is absolutely no problem with nitrogen on this island whatsoever. But the government has made it the general rule that in the whole of the Netherlands we are going to halve the nitrogen in problem areas, including this island. And so the farmers have heard that they might have to halve their flock, and in which case they can't run the business anymore. So then we're losing our sheep. And
so do you think that makes sense? Or?
It's stupid. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And I mean, we have a problem, and we have to solve it. But for example, we have a group of a couple of retired professors. We've written 2 plans at the moment how to solve the whole problem. And one of the plans that one of my colleagues made is that if we change the food for the cows and the chickens, for example, and also for the pigs, but it's a little bit different story, then we can easily bring down the amount of ammonia that they are producing back with 30, maybe even 40%. And we don't have to lower the amount of cattle whatsoever. And then we've already lowered the pressure of nitrogen with 30 to 40%. That can be done.
I wonder if they would taste the same.
Yeah, I don't know that because we have not really done it. But the idea that these people that are pushing the government to do this, the idea they want to make us all veganists. Vegans. So they want to turn us into vegans. They think that to solve the world, because nitrogen is not the real problem. It is a problem locally, but it's locally a problem, and you have to solve it locally. And yes, the Netherlands has a problem, and we have to solve it. That's true. But the big problem for the world is CO2, climate change, burning fossil fuels, and that is the real problem. And we have to solve that. If we don't solve that, my real belief is and I believe we can do that technically by getting away from these combustion engines and try to become as much electrified as possible and produce your electricity in a sustainable way.
And is the nitrogen issue connected with the CO2 issue?
In the sense that the nitrogen, the problem nitrogen that comes from combustion engines, yes. If your car, which is driving on petrol, becomes an electric car, you are kicking nitrogen into the air, dangerous nitrogen. So that's what you're doing. But if you had an electrical car, it doesn't do that anymore. And like myself, I have ordered my electrical car. I will get it in a couple of months. And I have solar panels on the roof of my house, making enough energy for that car. And okay, then I have solved the nitrogen problem and I've solved the CO2 problem.
So the nitrogen issue is that it acidifies the soil, you're saying?
It acidifies the soil and it changes the biodiversity. And in the sense that the plant species, you'll get the different plant species. And if you don't want that, then it's a problem.
The government is saying that they want to reduce the nitrogen levels to some level that they've set, right?
Yeah.
And that I heard somewhere that that's 3 times lower than in Germany. Even quite a lot more. Lower.
Yeah, but if you look, it depends a bit on the areas, and I don't know all the data myself, but it's somewhere between a factor of 7 and 100
times lower.
Yeah.
And why are they picking on Holland, or what is the?
You would have to ask these scientists. I mean, they do strange things. I'm not an expert in that. I'm an expert in the North Sea, and working on, for example, marine protection. And there I've seen the same, that from certain people who are not the real scientists that do the real research, but who are giving advice to the government, who are studying reports and bringing science together, but are not really the people who do the research, that they set the data. They are working for the government. They are not working in this institute here, where we have a boat, we go out at sea and we do our measurements and we get our data.
So the Dutch government, and if you could clarify which agencies or departments are, I heard there's a Minister of Nitrogen or something, right?
Yeah, there's recently, yeah. We have now recently a Ministry of Nitrogen.
and these farmers were telling me they have to write down how many cows they have, and they have a general cow nitrogen number, and they have all kinds of accounting every year on every single thing they do, right?
Yeah.
So, so the EU recommends these guidances, and then the Dutch government comes up with some number, or what? How
the funny thing is that the EU has a lot of recommendations, but they have to be laid down in the regulations per country. And one way or another, in the Netherlands, the way the government officials work with these rules, in the Netherlands it becomes stricter than in Germany. as an example.
And is that like a political process there?
It is a total process. It's political. It's the. Shall I wait a minute?
It's okay. Yeah.
So it's a political process, but it's also a matter of the history and the culture of the country. And for example, I think that in Germany, people are more easy on this nature issue, and of course, Germany is bigger. So Germany has the space to set a couple of areas aside and to do proper nature management there. And then you can see that how bigger the area is, how easier it is that at least in the central part of such areas, you will get the sort of nature you would like to have. But still, here in the Netherlands, for example, we like heather fields, and that's one of the types of nature that needs to be protected in this country. And this is one of the habitat types that the measures on nitrogen are taken for. But we already, here on the island of Texel, a couple of 100 years ago, we did not have heather fields. But then
Heather. What are those?
Hay.
Hay.
400 years ago, they started farming Texel. The dunes partly changed into heather fields, and the farmers discovered that if you want to keep them there, you need sheep. And so they brought the sheep to the island, and the sheep are grazing in the heather fields. They take away the grass, and the heathers grow beautifully. But it's costly. In the past, this was the income for the people here. But now you need a herd of sheep. Somebody has to guide that, and so it's quite expensive.
Looking from outside, just now hearing about it, it looks a little arbitrary how they're setting the levels of nitrogen, and the economic impacts seem devastating, like taking out, what is some of the statistics, maybe taking out 60-70% of farmers within a couple of years?
Yeah.
So they would be forced to sell their land and...
Yeah, that's what they are doing. And the funny thing is, it's only a couple of people that do this. I mean, I know, for example, because I became, when I retired, I became member of a Dutch political party. And, I started on working on the nitrogen there. And I said, okay, this is, the data are not right. And we should do something. And besides that, I think that you're overdoing the damage that nitrogen is doing to nature. There is a problem, but it's not as bad as you are claiming all the time. And this person who is member of parliament did not want to hear that. And we made this report for our political party. And we had the name of the party here on the report. And I was with a couple of people from the party. And the person in parliament said, I don't want to have it. And when I said we sent it to other parliament members, which we did, it still stated that it was made by people from our party, D66. And they were very angry with me. So I took it off, so there's no D66 here anymore. It's a public report, everybody can read it. And it went to Parliament, but this person from this party still denied even that the report existed. And I didn't understand this.
Would you say they're overdoing it with bankrupting the...
I mean, they are overdoing it in the sense that I'm not sure, but they have a different agenda from what the real issue is. The issue is, yes, we have areas where we have too much nitrogen and we should solve that problem, but you can do that reasonably locally, and we know how to do it. But they also think that we have a national problem for the whole country, and so they are spreading the problem all across the country. Like example, on this island, we now know from the data there is no real problem here. We are not above these values that are dangerous values. We don't have that at all. You can see it even in the field. You can find the plants that we are trying to protect. They're there already. So why should we send away half of the sheep from the island? I mean, or kill them. And if there is no problem whatsoever. The idea of these people is there is a problem everywhere, so we have to solve it everywhere. And there is this holy belief that if you release these nitrogen compounds at a certain spot, it will go across the whole country. But that's not true. And so then you have a different view, and then there's a model. So they have built a model, which is rather shaky. So it's a very complex model. And in our new report that will appear tomorrow, a few other people, beside myself, have written a chapter in here that this model is not suited for the calculations they are doing. And that the data, even in some spots, have a variation of 95%. And then you use those data to tell a farmer that he has to disappear. And that's something where I think this is not the way to approach this. So we have now suggested how to improve this. Mm-hmm. We think that we still, of course, we need the model, but we have to handle the data simply to show where you might expect problems. So it's good as a sort of first way of viewing where do I have to do certain things. That's fine, but don't use it at absolute figures. Certainly don't use it at figures that other people who want to get rid of these farmers can use in court to tell them these data are too high and now these farmers have to go. This is what's happening as well. So there are people going to court to tell that you are doing things that are not allowed, that are legally wrong, that is against EU regulations. And then the judge looks at the law and he looks at the data and says, the data are higher than allowed in the law, so no, you can't do this. So and then you and then if you realize that the data are not correct, what are we doing? And
that's what you're saying, the data is faulty.
The data are, well, by coincidence, a few of them might be correct, but the majority is faulty. Yeah. It's certainly not suited for the way they are used, that a judge, and we have a chapter in there, there's one of the professors who wrote a chapter in here, he's a lawyer and a legal expert, and he's also saying that these judges, they are simply using data which they believe. And they simply look at, that's the way they do this. But that's not correct from a scientific point of view. So we have here a clash between all kind of ways the politics work and the real scientific knowledge that we have. And then we have, for example, in the Netherlands, a few professors who call themselves nitrogen professors. And yes, they are nitrogen professors. They are experts in their own field, and I have no problem with that. But the nitrogen problem is very complex, and there are different parts of it that they don't know anything about. The example is that ammonium from the sea. I'm a professor in marine ecology, and I know that it's not possible. I tell that to these professors who are more experts in agriculture and nitrogen, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. And so they say, oh no, this can't be. I mean, the Institute of Health has modeled this, and this is how it works. And it doesn't work that way.
So why is the Institute of Health involved with environmental?
Because that's their job.
That's their job.
That's their job.
So I mean,
RIVM is supposed to do this, and they have done the corona story modeling, and they are doing the nitrogen modeling simply from the tasks that they have in the Netherlands. I mean, there are more than I think more than 2,000-3,000 people working there, so it's a very big institute.
So I mean, on the issue of modeling, like, is there with environmental modeling, how reliable is it? I mean, the quality of what you get out is affected by the model, what you put in, right?
If you put crap in, you get crap out. Yeah, that's something that we have said. I've been in this institute. I was the department head of the department where we made the big North Sea model. I mean, this institute is running a big North Sea model, and I've always said that if those models, if the outcome of the model coincides with something that we see in the field, that's a coincidence. And on the other hand, if these models are challenged by reality, so if I have modeled something and, for example, I have predicted that there will be so many fish, and that you can really measure the amount of fish that's there, they're always wrong. So if and because the system is too complex, there's a sort of chaos in there, and models can deal with that.
So why do we even use the models then?
Because it gives us the knowledge on the different ways the system can develop. So basically what it can show us is how do processes work. These models are very well suited to test theories and to see whether the things you think that you say, okay, I think that phosphate is influencing this or this, you model that. Your model tells you, yeah, if you throw more phosphate in the system, that and that might happen. Then you can look at that and you can check whether that's true. And this is a very simple example where it could be done. In the real complex world, in the real complex model, it can develop in so many directions that, like I said before, if the outcome of a model coincides with what I see there out in the field, that's coincidence, because the next year it will be completely different. It's the same with the weather models. I mean, weather models are very good, but there's a lot of chaos in there. And although we can predict that it will be warmer in the future, we have no idea what weather will be next year.
Right, because
and that's the same with
with the nitrogen models.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because these, they can barely predict the weather a week away, right?
Yeah, that's it.
But then you see these models of 20 years in advance. It seems crazy, no?
And then realize that in this nitrogen model that we have, there is an atmospheric part, because the nitrogen is transported by the atmosphere. And so an atmospheric part model of the complex model is nothing better than what we have to predict our weather. And then the model predicts what is going to happen in the coming few years with these farmers here and what the problems they cause, whereas this underlying atmospheric model is very coarse and not very predicting. And for example, I know the scientist who did it in Germany, and he says, well, the Germans have a much better atmospheric model. They use bigger computers because you need an enormous calculating time from computers if you want to model it properly. The Dutch did not have that. They wanted to have it cheaper, and so they simplified the atmospheric model. And they're paying a price for it now. That the nitrogen model is certainly, I would dare to say now, is not good.
Okay. Well, when I talk to some of the farmers, they say, "Oh, this is a land grab. We're trying to have our land stolen from us, and that maybe it's just kind of a setup." Or is that possible? You think?
Well, not from the modelers.
Not the modelers.
No, not. Well, I don't know what people are doing. Let's be honest. I mean, this is politics. This is all kind of things. I hear those rumors too, but I don't think that the modelers, they build a model, and I studied what the model looks like and how it works, and there are some very nice parts in there. I'm impressed. I mean, it's a very good part of the model, but as a total model, there are already big question marks, and the major issue is that the government is believing the data that come out of the model and is using those data to make the policy, including getting rid of the farmers. And that's where it goes wrong. And I'm quite sure that those people that built on the model and did a lot of work for tens of years, but they wrote a few reports on it, that if I read those, I think, how the hell did they get this? And how did they do this? And this can't be right. And then what in general you see is that they work on part of the model that is not really their expertise. And then they have to do a couple of things, and I'm sure that they read literature and they talk with other people. But you can put some question marks there. And so, and at the same time, what I discovered, and I've spoken with other people who have exactly the same experience, is that this institute, they do a lot of modeling, and it's their big business. And there are a couple of models now that they have built where this sort of criticism is coming up now. And they don't want that criticism, because that is damaging their institute. And the trust of the government in that institute could disappear, and then they have a real problem. So that's why they are sticking to the model, to the outcomes, and they keep pushing this is right. I mean, like I said, there's no ammonia coming out of the North Sea, And they had said in the past that there is ammonia coming out of the North Sea, and so they stick to that. And now again, I mean, there's a new letter of the minister to Parliament about this nitrogen, and they're stating that they're doing experiments. And they didn't want to tell me what experiments they were doing, but I discovered, and they are nonsense experiments. It's simply to buy time. And that's how it works.
Okay.
Some other scientists will kill me if they hear me saying this, but
well, it's better to say.
that's how it works. Yeah. That's how it works.
So, well, can we go over your reports? Maybe can you give me a summary of each one?
Yeah, that's okay. This was our first one.
And what year was that?
This was 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, and I think we did the formal report was a year ago. And so here we have the summary stating some recommendations where we said, well, look at these modeling, look at the data, and especially at that time we said, look at this ammonia from the sea. Talking about this ammonia from the sea, we have the recommendation here, have a better look at the data and at the model. And for example, for the island of Texel, the National Health Institute, who's building the model, they found a difference between their measurements and the amount of ammonia in the air and what comes out of the model. And they have said the data are correct. So the model must be wrong. And so they are correcting the model by adding in the computer nitrogen. Simply data. That has nothing to do with what's happening outside. And I dare to say that nitrogen does not exist. And I've challenged them. I said, and because they said, yeah, but the data are correct. Our measurements are correct. I said, no, I don't think they are correct. I think they are wrong. No, they are absolutely correct. So we can't discuss this any further. Our data are correct.
And where did the data come from?
From little measurements that they do here along the coast. They have these little tubes where they catch some air and they filter out the ammonia, and then they calculate the amount of ammonia in the air. And and that they feed and they compare with the model, and then they discover that the data, the amount is higher than what the model shows.
And the concern is just that it would make the soil acidic, and then some nettles don't grow.
No. The real reason is there are EU regulations. We have to stick to those. Whether we have translated them in the right data is another story, but there are regulations. If we don't do that, we get fines from the EU, and we have big problems
with the EU.
With EU, and so the regulations is basically their problem. And then of course to sell this, they say, yeah, no, it's about nature, and nature is not going well, and the good environmental status of nature here in these areas is far below the level that it should be. The EU has said that it has to be at a certain level in 5 years from now, so we have to make sure that it gets there. And it's their holy belief that it's just the nitrogen that is doing this, and that if you lower the nitrogen, the system will recover. Well, that we have dealt with in our second report.
Okay, is there a basis to these EU regulations, do you think?
Oh, yeah. The way they have discussed this, I mean, the EU, of course, in the past, people were building everywhere and destroying nature, and so there were good reasons, the same for the sea, for example, that we have to protect areas. Animals, plants, habitat types, we have to protect that. That is simply laid down also in international regulations, including the Convention on Biodiversity, and that's good, because we believe, and I do believe the same, that if we destroy biodiversity too much, so if we lose too many species, we sooner or later get into trouble.
But specifically with these nitrogen levels, what biodiversity would any of this really make a difference with? You
can't really say that so easily. I mean, it's not a one-to-one calculation. If you look at what is happening at the moment in the Netherlands we are losing biodiversity. But like for example yesterday in the news, it was we have a period of incredible drought. Drought, eh? Droogte, yeah.
Yeah, drought.
Yeah. At the moment we have a period of incredible drought, and that is really influencing our nature. And we see plants dying, trees dying, all kind of lake-type areas dry out, and those animals are disappearing. Mm-hmm. That's the real reason why biodiversity is going down. But what can we do about this rain? Not that much. We must hope that it will come back and that this water will be there. And of course we can take measures to store more water for the future, and that's what we're going to do, for sure. But at the same time, it has been much easier to say that no, this is nitrogen. So and there are people blaming it all on nitrogen, and then they're saying, I know this parliamentarian, for example, he was on the television, nature is dying, we have to do immediately, we have to immediately halve the amount of cattle in this country, because otherwise nature will be gone. And that is what he's stating, and he succeeded in getting that into the plans of the government. And now these are the holy plans of these 4 coalition parties in the Dutch parliament, and they go for it.
So it kind of, you're saying there's a lot is being blamed on nitrogen.
Yeah, yeah, and of course they will mention a couple of other things, but at the moment they are pushing for nitrogen is the big problem, and if you don't do anything, then and whether then earlier question, whether then somewhere behind this, for certain areas it could be, is that we want to build houses, we need area for that, and if we clean that area from the farmers, we create space for house building.
But didn't he say that makes nitrogen too, so that argument doesn't make sense?
I don't know, but I always keep comparing it. I know all the details from this island where I live, and there this is absolutely bullshit. I mean, that if you look where we can build some houses and what we want to do, then the space is not a problem. The problem is that somebody, somewhere in this National Institute for Health, has made a statement that building a house causes more nitrogen to come out. The data show that we have too much nitrogen on this island, and so you can't build. And so what they have to do then is to kick out these sheep, create nitrogen space to build houses here.
Like a nitrogen safe space?
Yeah, so that you have space for building and creating this area that is not really there. I mean, it
just sounds a little preposterous.
It's based on wrong assumptions, partly.
Yeah.
At the same time, we do have problems. We are not denying. Even in our report, we have said one of the first statements is: yes, we have problems. Yes, we have to do something. Yes, we have to lower the output of the Dutch population of nitrogen. We have to halve that again. But we have to realize that since 1990, we have already halved it. So in 1990, we had double the amount that we have nowadays. In those days, we had big problems. I mean, we had the acidification of the European forests, but that was mainly sulfur from diesel engines.
Which they reduced the sulfur?
And they discovered that, and then from then on, they cleaned the diesel from the sulfur. So within 2 years, the diesel was sulfur-free, and so that doesn't get into the atmosphere anymore.
And that's where you're saying a similar thing could be done with nitrogen.
A similar thing can be done with nitrogen. We can take measures to lower it quite a lot, and at the same time we overstating the real effects.
So what are some other less economically apocalyptic solutions?
Well, different feed. So feeding the cows certain less amino acids or of a certain type amino acids. And another way to do it with cows, I recently saw that they have these cow toilets nowadays. And this is a little toilet that comes out of the ceiling, that bumps into the cow, and then the cow puts his urine in that little toilet, in the bowl. At that moment, you have the urine in your hands. The ureum in the urine is the nitrogen compound that the cows produce. That's what the nitrogen is. You simply take that away, you make artificial fertilizer of it or whatever you do, and you don't have the problem.
So you just collect the urine.
It doesn't get collect the urine as much as possible, and reuse that one way or another, can be done. But make sure it does not get on your stable floor. It does not get too much in your grasslands or in the ditches around there. And if you can do that, and this can be done, then you have solved already half of the problem. And so what we need is innovative farming, and not immediately saying we can't do it. Yes, we can, but we have to. It needs money. The government will have to support it, and then I'm quite sure. And my colleague Johan Sanders, who is co-author of these reports, has a lot of great ideas, I think, how to do this. And it's simply fermenting grass, for example. If you ferment the grass before you feed it to the cows, they will produce less ammonia, and things like that can be done.
Sounds healthy for.
I think it's much healthier than throwing all your farmers out.
The cows will have good gut biome, huh?
Yeah, that too. But at the same time, and I've stated that in our new report now, is what we are doing in the Netherlands at the moment is we are kicking out our farmers. But they are producing our food. Who is going to do that? Now, from then on, we have plenty because we are exporting half of our food. Okay, then we don't export it anymore, but we are importing the other half of our food. We are big food importers.
Yeah, it makes you think there's maybe some initiative to change the food system around, or.
Now, but what can be done? That another solution is if we change our own feeding behavior. So if we become all vegan, we will lower the amount of nitrogen, that's for sure, and certainly we will also lower the amount of CO2 that gets into the air. So if you want to see that as the solution for the future humankind, well, then you can do that.
So you said someone wants to make us all vegan?
Yeah, yeah.
Who is that? Who? EU?
I won't mention somebody in Parliament.
Someone in Parliament, okay. But he's saying things that the EU is pushing that too?
He is pushing, he's pushing circular agriculture, so that you use the things that your leftovers you use to produce other things.
But the European Union is pushing this idea too? We should all be vegan?
Well, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know that. I'm not in those.
Okay, anyway. So can we go over the second report?
Yeah, the second one, we looked into it in more detail. And in this one, we have a couple of other new authors brought into the game. And, two of those are writing a book on how the government is using models. And one of the models that they studied is the nitrogen model. And, simply in the end of the conclusions of their story, they state that the nitrogen model is not suited to calculate the things you would like to calculate with. You can use it for analyzing where the problems might be and as a scientific tool to understand the processes better, but it's absolutely not capable of calculating the data on which to base your measurements against the farmers. It's bullshit. And second paper in here states the same, and even extra words, hard words. And I must say, I already had the same ideas myself, but now they wrote it down. So that's good. And another thing is new in our new report is that we had a professor in legal, a legal expert. And so he wrote a chapter in here that there is quite a lot of space in laws and in the way how to deal with it. In, for example, the Habitat Directive, that's one of the regulating laws in here. He said there is plenty of space to do what we need to do, and we can still continue with most of the activities we have now. And of course, in the long run, we both have to change the laws so that we don't run into the problem that a judge has to punish a farmer by saying, okay, you have to lower your stock. No, he can look at the data and only do that in spots where we have a real problem. and not everywhere in the whole of the country.
And
This is one of the problems we of course have, is that if you live in a country, these laws and rules are made for the whole country. And what we need is that if you have a local problem like this, then you need local regulations.
Yeah, they're punishing everyone in the whole country.
Yeah, and that should not be done. Because that's not necessary at all. And by doing so, I mean, many more farmers will run away than is needed. And like I said, then we don't have the people to produce our food. And if you bicycle here on Texel, and we have a beautiful landscape, a little hilly, with sheep. Texel is a real sheep island. A lot of tourists come here to see the sheep, and okay. But now we're sending half of the farmers away. Who is going to take care of the landscape of Texel? That's what these farmers are doing. I mean, they're building these beautiful tuinwallen, as we call them. I mean, these little separations between the grasslands made of grass sods, and a little sort of dike that is there, beautiful. And yeah, if those people are not there anymore, these things will fall apart in the future, and the whole landscape will disappear. Is that what we want? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, in Den Haag, the people who are at the moment in power are only looking at this nitrogen story. Very narrow-minded, and this is not the way to do it. And that's what we're stating in this report, and at the same time we're giving the solutions how to proceed. At the same time we have a complete plan how to restore nature, and what we say there is also for nature, it is a problem on the square meter, or on the square kilometer if you want to have it a bit scaled up. But that's where you have the problem, and that's where you have to solve it.
And do you think they're going to listen to you?
No. Not yet. Except they have created a huge problem for themselves, and the farmers are now really angry. And the actions they are take, well, I don't like that. I mean, hanging the flag upside down, I understand, and because their life is thrown upside down, and I think in that case you have the right to hang your own flag upside down, but don't throw all this stuff on the highways. Certainly not asbestos. Don't throw that on the highway. That's not a good action. But at the same time, I understand them, and I think that the pressure on the government to come with better solutions than they have done so far is so big that I hope they will listen to us. I'm not stating that everything we propose is good enough, but I think that we should start the dialogue to see how we can solve the problem without causing an enormous amount of new problems, because that's what we are doing now, and I think that can be done. And we have now the two reports that will be published. The second one will be officially public tomorrow, and yeah, people can read it. And we have down here, for example, pictures of these beautiful orchids and other plants that are beautiful in some of the swamps here on Texel. We also have these areas where you have these nettles and grasses that are overgrowing the nature that's there, but we can change that. And looking at the different areas, at the scale of that area, and looking at the reality, the real nature values, not at the nitrogen data, and making the nitrogen data and determining what we should do, but making the value of nature determining what we should do.
Makes sense, huh?
That's what we are suggesting here.
Look at reality, not your models, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, what percentage of the air is nitrogen?
Oh, in what we are breeding here.
That's
Our air is 78 and a little bit nitrogen and N2. So that's
N2 gas, yeah.
N2 gas. It's completely innocent and no problem at all.
And so, what is the nitrogens they're talking about? This is ammonia.
This is ammonia and a nitrate, basically, or NOx as we call it, because there are a few different compounds with N and O. But those are, in that case, the molecules or the atoms. The nitrogen atom and the hydrogen atom together form ammonium, and the nitrogen and the oxygen form these NOx's. And those forms of nitrogen do the damage.
And they cause acidification of soil.
They cause acidification. And also they can cause, if there are too much is too much in the soil, that certain plants are basically poisoned by that. I mean, it's not only acidification, it's simply also the presence of these high compounds of these nutrients that other plants can deal with it much better, and they grow them much faster. So certain plants can deal with these high amounts, and that has nothing to do with acidification, but simply dealing with the amount of nutrients. And the plants, like for example the orchids, they can't. And so they are overgrown by the other plants, and then they disappear. So it's basically a shift in plant growth and in species composition that is caused by the presence of these nutrients. And that's not only nitrogen, there's a couple of others that also play a role in here, but nitrogen is the most important one.
Because nitrogen is just one of the basic fertilizers, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying that higher nitrogen levels will lead to more of certain kinds of plant growth?
Certain plants grow higher biomasses. I mean,
so that'll overgrow certain other plants.
I mean, if you look at these areas, there's a picture here of the nettle growth in a certain area in the Netherlands. Yeah, they grow so big that all the other plants are squeezed out, and the only thing that's left over is nettles and a few other things. But
I guess I'm just wondering, like, as an outsider, would this really cause such a big problem? I mean, haven't people been farming cows and sheep and stuff for a long time here, and that this would really cause some apocalyptic nettle overgrowth?
I mean, looking at me, knowing a lot about nitrogen, I would say no. Looking at the Dutch NGOs, they were with the government yesterday, and they said, no, we have to change this rapidly, and it has to go much faster, etc. So they say yes. If you go to Germany, they have a completely different way of thinking, and they don't mind at all. Of course, locally, yes, and there are a few beautiful nature areas where it's also overgrowing, and they realize that, and I'm sure they are working on it, but they don't make such a fuss about it, and they don't, certainly what the Netherlands at the moment is doing, that they punish a farmer on my island for something that is happening 150 kilometers on the other side of the country. And that's nonsense. It doesn't go there. It doesn't. Well, it might go there a little bit, but they're so minor that those are not the issues. The issues there are the local farmers that throw a lot of ammonia into the air. They are the problems, and you have to solve it there. But you don't have to punish a sheep farmer on Texel for something that's happening on the other side of the country, and that's what this model is doing. Okay. And that is stupid.
Great. Well, thank you, Professor Lindeboom, for helping decipher the politics of nitrogen. Huh?
Yeah, I'm always honest.
Yeah.
Audible, eh?
That's wonderful.